Margaret Thompson shuffled into elite fitness wearing a faded cardigan and comfortable sneakers, her silver hair pulled back in a simple bun. At 72, she looked like any grandmother picking up groceries, not someone entering the city's most exclusive gym. The muscled trainer behind the desk, Derek Martinez, took one look at her and smirked. Within minutes, he was publicly questioning her membership, suggesting she'd be more comfortable at the senior center down the street. Other gym members stopped their workouts to stare as Derek's voice grew louder, his condescending tone echoing through the pristine facility. Margaret stood quietly, her hands steady despite the humiliation. They had no idea that those weathered hands had once lifted more weight than anyone in that room could imagine. What happened next left everyone speechless. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Margaret Thompson stirred her morning tea with the same silver spoon she had used for the past 47 years, watching the steam curl upward in her small kitchen as the first rays of sunlight filtered through her modest apartment windows. At 72, her daily routine was as predictable as the sunrise itself. She would sit in her favorite worn armchair, reading the newspaper while sipping her Earl Grey, then tend to the small herb garden on her fire escape before beginning her day. Her apartment reflected her simple tastes. Mismatched furniture collected over decades, family photographs in various frames, and books stacked on every available surface. Nothing suggested wealth or prestige, just the comfortable accumulation of a life well lived. The morning had started like any other until she remembered Dr. Richardson's words from her recent checkup. "Margaret, your bone density results are concerning," he had said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed her chart. "At your age, preventing fractures should be a priority. I strongly recommend resistance training to maintain bone health and muscle mass. Weight-bearing exercises could make all the difference." She had nodded politely, though the suggestion seemed almost amusing. The good doctor had no idea what her body had once been capable of achieving. Margaret moved through her apartment with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to conserve energy while maintaining purpose. She dressed in her usual attire, comfortable gray sweatpants, a soft cardigan over a plain white t-shirt, and her well-worn walking shoes. Her silver hair, streaked with the remnants of what had once been auburn, was pulled back into a practical bun secured with bobby pins. She looked exactly like what she appeared to be, a gentle grandmother who spent her days reading, gardening, and perhaps volunteering at the local library. After considerable research, she had chosen Elite Fitness despite its reputation as the city's most exclusive gym. The monthly membership fee had made her wince, but the facility boasted the best equipment and most comprehensive programs. More importantly, it was the only gym in the area with a proper Olympic weightlifting platform. Margaret smiled to herself as she gathered her simple canvas bag containing a water bottle, small towel, and her membership card. Today would mark her return to a world she had left behind decades ago. Though she suspected no one would recognize the quiet woman who was about to walk through those gleaming glass doors. Elite Fitness occupied the entire 15th floor of the prestigious Meridian Tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city skyline. The entrance featured polished marble floors, contemporary artwork, and a reception desk crafted from imported Italian granite. Everything gleamed under carefully positioned LED lighting that cast the perfect glow on the gleaming chrome equipment visible through glass walls. The monthly membership fee started at $800, effectively filtering out anyone who could not afford to belong to what the marketing materials described as an exclusive fitness experience for discerning individuals. The gym's interior resembled a luxury hotel more than a traditional fitness facility. State-of-the-art cardio machines occupied one section, each equipped with personal entertainment systems and premium sound isolation. The strength training area showcased equipment from the world's most expensive manufacturers, with machines that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Personal training sessions were conducted in semi-private alcoves, ensuring members never felt exposed or uncomfortable. Even the water fountains dispensed filtered spring water at the perfect temperature. Derek Martinez commanded this domain with the confidence of someone who understood his role as curator of excellence. At 34, he possessed the sculpted physique that served as his primary advertisement. Every muscle group developed to magazine-worthy proportions. His thick black hair was styled with precision, and his goatee was trimmed to exact specifications each morning. Derek wore his signature-fitted black polo shirt with the Elite Fitness logo embroidered in gold thread, paired with perfectly pressed khaki pants and spotless white athletic shoes. His gold watch and matching chain completed an image he had cultivated over 6 years as head trainer. Derek prided himself on maintaining the gym's reputation through careful attention to detail and unwavering standards. He could assess a potential member's fitness level, financial status, and commitment level within seconds of meeting them. His trained eye identified those who belonged in this exclusive environment versus those who might be more comfortable at standard commercial gyms. He viewed himself as a guardian of the Elite Fitness brand, ensuring that every member contributed to the sophisticated atmosphere that justified the premium pricing. The morning shift was Derek's favorite time, when serious athletes and successful business professionals filled the facility. These were his people. Individuals who understood quality, demanded excellence, and respected the investment required for superior results. He straightened his signature black tie with the small Elite Fitness pin, checked his reflection in the mirrored reception area, and prepared for another day of maintaining the standards that made Elite Fitness the most coveted membership in the city. Margaret stepped through the gleaming glass doors of Elite Fitness, her worn sneakers silent against the pristine marble floor. The stark contrast was immediate and overwhelming. Her faded cardigan and comfortable sweatpants seemed to absorb the sophisticated lighting that made everything else sparkle with expensive elegance. She felt like a dandelion that had somehow sprouted in a carefully manicured rose garden, conspicuous in her simplicity amid such calculated luxury. Derek looked up from his position behind the granite reception desk, his trained smile faltering as his eyes took in the elderly woman standing uncertainly near the entrance. His gaze traveled from her silver hair pulled back in a simple bun to her practical walking shoes, cataloging every detail that seemed wrong for this environment. In his 6 years at Elite Fitness, he had developed an instinct for spotting people who did not belong, and every alarm bell in his head was ringing. "Excuse me," Derek called out, his voice carrying the polished tone he reserved for delicate situations. He stood to his full height, straightening his black polo shirt as he moved around the desk. "Are you looking for someone? Perhaps you're here to pick up a family member?" Margaret approached the reception area with measured steps, her canvas bag clutched in her weathered hands. "Good morning," she said in her soft voice. "I'm here for my membership orientation." Derek's eyebrows lifted slightly, and he glanced around the pristine lobby as if expecting someone to emerge and explain this obvious mistake. The morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows highlighted the contrast between Margaret's humble appearance and the sophisticated surroundings. Other members moved past them toward the equipment areas, their designer workout attire and confident bearing marking them as clear inhabitants of this exclusive world. "I think there might be some confusion," Derek replied, his professional smile becoming more strained. "Elite Fitness requires a rather substantial financial commitment, and our programs are quite intensive. Are you perhaps looking for the community center? They have wonderful programs for seniors just a few blocks down the street." Margaret reached into her canvas bag and withdrew a folder containing her membership documentation. "I believe my paperwork is in order," she said calmly, extending the folder toward Derek. Her voice remained steady despite the obvious implication that she had wandered into the wrong place entirely. Derek accepted the folder with obvious reluctance, his manicured fingers handling the documents as if they might be contaminated. He flipped through the membership agreement, payment confirmations, and health clearance forms with increasing skepticism. The paperwork appeared legitimate, but something felt fundamentally wrong about this situation. His eyes narrowed as he scrutinized every detail, searching for some flaw that would justify his instincts. "These documents seem to be in order," Derek admitted slowly, his tone suggesting this fact was somehow suspicious rather than reassuring. "But I have to ask, Mrs. Thompson, what exactly are your fitness goals?" Elite Fitness specializes in high-intensity training and advanced athletic performance. Our equipment requires significant strength and coordination that might be challenging for someone in your demographic. Margaret folded her hands in front of her, maintaining her composed expression despite the thinly veiled insult. "I'm looking to maintain my strength and bone density through resistance training," she replied simply. "My doctor recommended weight-bearing exercises." Derek leaned against the reception desk, adopting the posture of someone delivering sage advice to a confused elderly relative. "I appreciate that your doctor means well, but generic medical advice doesn't always translate to practical reality. Our weight machines start at resistances that might be overwhelming for someone who hasn't maintained an active lifestyle. Have you considered water aerobics? There's an excellent aquatic therapy program at the YMCA that would be much more suitable for your needs. I believe I can manage the equipment here," Margaret said, her voice remaining steady despite the growing condescension in Derek's tone. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been in the fitness industry for over a decade," Derek continued, his professional smile becoming increasingly forced. "I've seen too many seniors injure themselves by overestimating their capabilities. The liability issues alone are concerning. Perhaps we should discuss more age-appropriate alternatives. The community center has chair yoga classes that receive wonderful reviews. There's even a book club that meets afterward." Margaret's weathered hands remained steady as she met Derek's gaze directly. "I paid the membership fee and completed all required documentation. I simply want to use the facilities I've purchased access to." Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This elderly woman was proving more stubborn than he had anticipated, and her quiet persistence was beginning to irritate him. He glanced around the elegant lobby, acutely aware that other members were starting to notice the prolonged conversation at the reception desk. This situation needed to be resolved quickly and diplomatically before it created an uncomfortable atmosphere for the paying members who truly belonged here. Derek's carefully maintained professional demeanor began to crack as Margaret's quiet insistence challenged his authority. He had handled similar situations before, but never with someone so stubbornly polite in the face of obvious logic. His voice rose slightly, carrying across the marble lobby with an edge that hadn't been present moments earlier. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm trying to help you understand that this environment might not be what you're expecting," Derek said, his words echoing off the polished surfaces. "Elite Fitness caters to serious athletes and fitness enthusiasts. Our youngest member is 25, and even our oldest regular members are accomplished athletes with decades of experience." The elevated conversation began drawing glances from other members who were arriving for their morning workouts. A businessman in expensive athletic wear slowed his stride toward the locker rooms, his attention caught by the unusual scene at the reception desk. Two women chatting near the entrance lowered their voices to better hear the exchange, their expressions shifting from casual curiosity to uncomfortable awareness that something was amiss. Sarah Chen had just finished checking in when the raised voices caught her attention. At 28, she was a regular at Elite Fitness, using her marketing firm's corporate membership to maintain her fitness routine between demanding client meetings. She recognized Derek immediately and had always found his professional demeanor slightly condescending, though she had never been on the receiving end of his gatekeeping behavior. The elderly woman standing patiently at the reception desk looked like she could be someone's grandmother, certainly not the typical member who commanded Derek's usual deference. Sarah pretended to adjust her water bottle while listening to the exchange, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as Derek's voice grew more patronizing. She watched Margaret's shoulders remain straight despite the obvious humiliation of being questioned so publicly about her right to be there. The contrast was stark. Derek, in his pristine Elite Fitness uniform, projecting authority and belonging, while the elderly woman in her simple cardigan stood her ground with quiet dignity. "Perhaps you could try a complimentary day pass at Silver Sneakers first," Derek continued, his suggestion carrying across the lobby like an announcement. "It's a wonderful program specifically designed for seniors. They have modified equipment and trained staff who understand the unique needs of your age group." More members paused in their routines, creating a growing audience for what was becoming an uncomfortable spectacle. Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she watched the scene unfold. The elderly woman's calm responses only seemed to frustrate Derek further, and she could sense the situation spiraling toward something much worse than a simple membership misunderstanding. The pristine atmosphere of elite fitness was being poisoned by something that felt fundamentally wrong, though she wasn't sure how to intervene without making things worse. Margaret tucked her membership documents back into her canvas bag with deliberate care, her movements reflecting the patience of someone who had weathered far greater storms than a condescending gym trainer. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Martinez," she said, reading his name tag with the same politeness she might use to thank a store clerk. "I believe I'll start with a brief orientation of the facilities now." She stepped toward the glass doors leading to the main workout area, her worn sneakers making soft sounds against the marble floor. The equipment beckoned beyond the transparent barrier, sophisticated machines that gleamed under the carefully positioned lighting. Margaret had studied the gym's layout online and knew exactly where she wanted to begin her session. Derek moved swiftly to intercept her path, his athletic frame positioning itself between Margaret and the entrance to the equipment area. He placed one hand on the glass door handle while extending his other arm across the doorway, creating a human barrier that was impossible to ignore. His movement was smooth and practiced, the kind of blocking maneuver he might use to prevent an unauthorized person from accessing restricted areas. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but I can't allow you to proceed without a proper safety orientation," Derek said, his voice taking on the tone of a parent addressing a wayward child. "Our equipment is highly sophisticated and requires specific training to operate safely. These aren't the simple machines you might find at a basic gym." Margaret stopped politely, though her eyes remained focused on the equipment visible through the glass. "I understand there may be safety protocols," she replied. "I'm prepared to follow whatever procedures are necessary." Derek's professional smile became more strained as he launched into what sounded like a rehearsed lecture. "The resistance levels on our machines start at weights that could cause serious injury to someone without proper conditioning. Our cable systems operate on hydraulic principles that require significant grip strength and coordination. Even our cardio equipment has advanced programming that could be overwhelming for someone unfamiliar with modern fitness technology." He gestured toward the gleaming machines with the pride of someone displaying precious artifacts. "These aren't simple weights, Mrs. Thompson. This is professional-grade equipment designed for serious athletes. Someone like yourself could easily strain muscles, damage joints, or worse. The insurance liability alone makes it impossible for me to allow unsupervised access until you've demonstrated appropriate fitness levels." Margaret listened to his patronizing explanation with the same patient attention she might give to a grandchild, explaining why vegetables were unnecessary. The growing commotion near the reception area began drawing more attention from throughout the facility. Members who had been focused on their morning routines found themselves glancing toward the glass lobby, where an elderly woman stood facing down the head trainer. The unusual nature of the confrontation proved impossible to ignore, and one by one, serious athletes abandoned their exercises to observe the unfolding drama. A prominent businessman stepped off his treadmill mid-stride, his curiosity overriding his commitment to his cardio session. Two women who had been stretching in the yoga area moved closer to the glass partition, their whispered conversations creating a buzz of speculation. Even members lifting weights in the far corner paused between sets, their attention drawn to Derek's increasingly animated gestures and rising voice. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to understand the liability issues involved here," Derek announced, his words now clearly audible to the growing audience. His professional facade was slipping as his frustration mounted, and his tone carried the exasperated quality of someone dealing with an unreasonable person. "Elite Fitness has strict insurance requirements. Our policies specifically address age-related risk factors and pre-existing conditions that could result in injury claims." Margaret remained standing in the same spot, her canvas bag clutched in her weathered hands, acutely aware that she had become the center of unwanted attention. The marble floor beneath her feet felt cold and unforgiving, much like the stares from the gathering crowd of perfectly dressed fitness enthusiasts. Yet she maintained her composure, her spine straight, and her expression calm despite the mounting humiliation. "Perhaps what would make everyone more comfortable," Derek continued, his voice carrying across the lobby like an announcement, "would be for you to consider facilities specifically designed for your demographic. There are wonderful senior centers with chair exercise programs, water walking sessions, and gentle stretching classes. They even have social activities afterward, like bridge tournaments and craft circles. The condescension in his voice was no longer subtle, and several members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Derek's suggestions became increasingly patronizing. Sarah Chen felt her cheeks flush with secondhand embarrassment, not for herself, but for the elderly woman who was being publicly dismissed like a lost child who had wandered into the wrong building. The community center on Maple Street has an excellent silver sneakers program, Derek added, his tone suggesting he was offering a generous solution to an obvious problem. They understand the unique needs of seniors and have equipment specifically modified for limited mobility and reduced strength capacity. You'd be much more comfortable there, surrounded by people your own age who share similar fitness limitations. The cruel irony of his words hung in the air as more members gathered to witness what had become an uncomfortable spectacle of age discrimination. Margaret stood perfectly still amid the growing spectacle, her external composure masking the flood of memories that Derek's condescending words had unleashed. In her mind's eye, she could see herself at 25, standing on a platform in a packed arena, her hands wrapped around a barbell loaded with more weight than anyone in this pristine facility could imagine lifting. The roar of 10,000 spectators had filled her ears as she prepared for the lift that would change her life forever. She remembered the calluses on her palms, earned through countless hours of training when gyms were sparse and equipment was basic. There had been no marble floors or designer workout clothes then, just determination and an iron will that had carried her to heights these people could never comprehend. Her younger self had possessed shoulders that could bear not just crushing weights, but the expectations of an entire nation watching from their television sets. Those days felt like another lifetime now, separated by decades of deliberate obscurity and quiet living. After retiring from competition, Margaret had chosen simplicity over celebrity, privacy over recognition. She had built a peaceful existence far from the spotlight, content to let her achievements fade into sporting history while she pursued a normal life. The woman these people saw before them was real, but she was only part of the story. Margaret drew a slow, steadying breath, the same technique she had used before every major lift of her career. She would not allow Derek's ignorance to diminish her dignity or force her into defending accomplishments that spoke for themselves. The young trainer's assumptions revealed more about his character than her capabilities, and she refused to lower herself to his level of petty cruelty. As the crowd of onlookers grew larger and Derek's voice grew more patronizing, Margaret felt a gentle touch on her arm. She turned to see a young woman with kind eyes and an expression of genuine concern. Sarah Chen had approached quietly, positioning herself slightly between Margaret and the growing audience. "Excuse me," Sarah said softly, her voice intended only for Margaret's ears. "I'm Sarah. I've been a member here for 3 years, and I want you to know that this treatment is completely unacceptable." She glanced meaningfully at Derek, who was still holding his position blocking the equipment area. "You have every right to be here, and I'll be happy to show you around the facility if you'd like." Margaret felt a spark of gratitude for this unexpected kindness amid such public humiliation. Derek's confidence wavered as he watched Sarah Chen position herself as an ally to the elderly woman. This unexpected development threatened his carefully orchestrated resolution, and he realized he needed additional authority to handle what was becoming an increasingly complicated situation. He glanced toward the staff office, catching the eye of his assistant manager, Kevin Rodriguez, who had been observing the growing commotion with obvious concern. "Kevin, could you come over here, please?" Derek called out, his voice carrying a note of urgency that made it clear this was not a casual request. Kevin hurried across the lobby, his expression shifting from curiosity to professional alarm as he took in the scene. The elderly woman at the center of attention, the growing crowd of members, and Derek's obvious frustration. More members continued to gather around the reception area, their morning routines forgotten in favor of witnessing this unprecedented drama. The pristine lobby had transformed into an uncomfortable theater, with Margaret unwillingly cast as the central figure in a spectacle she had never wanted to create. Whispered conversations rippled through the crowd as people speculated about what could possibly justify such a prolonged confrontation. "Mrs. Thompson," Derek announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "despite your paperwork, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Elite Fitness reserves the right to refuse service when safety concerns override membership status. Your presence creates potential liability issues that we simply cannot accept. Kevin nodded in agreement, adding his authority to Derek's decision. We can arrange for a full refund of your membership fees, he offered, as if this gesture somehow justified their discriminatory treatment. There are many facilities better suited to your needs and physical limitations. The crowd stirred uncomfortably as the situation reached this new level of public humiliation. Several members exchanged troubled glances, sensing that they were witnessing something fundamentally wrong but uncertain how to intervene without creating an even bigger scene. Margaret raised her chin slightly, her voice remaining steady despite the mounting pressure from the staff and scrutiny from the gathered members. I have paid my membership fees in full and completed all required documentation, she said clearly, her words carrying across the marble lobby. I have every right to use these facilities, and I intend to exercise that right. Her quiet insistence carried a strength that surprised everyone present, including Derek, who had expected her to capitulate under such overwhelming social pressure. Instead, she stood her ground with the unshakable dignity of someone who had faced far greater challenges than a condescending gym trainer. Derek's professional facade cracked completely as Margaret's quiet defiance challenged everything he believed about maintaining elite fitness standards. His face flushed with frustration, and his voice rose to a level that commanded attention from every corner of the lobby. The carefully cultivated image of the sophisticated fitness professional gave way to something much uglier as his authority was questioned in front of the very members he worked to impress. Mrs. Thompson, you're creating a disruptive situation that's making other members uncomfortable, Derek declared loudly, gesturing toward the crowd that had gathered to witness the spectacle. Elite Fitness has built its reputation on maintaining the highest standards of excellence, and I will not allow that reputation to be compromised by someone who refuses to accept reasonable guidance. His voice echoed off the marble walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, ensuring that every word carried throughout the pristine facility. Members who had been trying to continue their workouts abandoned any pretense of privacy, openly staring at the confrontation unfolding before them. The morning sunlight streaming through the glass seemed to spotlight the dramatic scene, casting harsh shadows that emphasized the tension crackling through the air. I'm calling security to escort you from the premises, Derek announced, reaching for the phone at the reception desk with theatrical authority. This gym serves a very specific clientele, and we have an obligation to protect the environment that our members pay premium prices to enjoy. Your presence here is inappropriate and potentially dangerous to yourself and others. Kevin nodded emphatically beside him, adding his voice to the public condemnation. We've offered reasonable alternatives and a full refund. Continuing to demand access to facilities clearly beyond your capabilities shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what elite fitness represents. The crowd stirred uneasily as Derek's pronouncements grew more pompous and cruel. Sarah Chen felt her stomach churn with disgust at the public humiliation being inflicted on the elderly woman, while other members shifted uncomfortably, sensing they were witnessing something that crossed the line from professional concern into outright discrimination. Through it all, Margaret remained perfectly still, her hands folded calmly in front of her as Derek's tirade washed over her without apparent effect. She had weathered far greater storms than an insecure trainer protecting his territory, and she refused to dignify his behavior with an emotional response. When Derek finally paused in his lengthy proclamation about gym standards and member safety, Margaret spoke in a voice so quiet that everyone strained to hear her words. I would like to speak with the manager, please. The simple request, delivered with unshakable composure, somehow carried more authority than all of Derek's theatrical posturing. Her calm dignity in the face of such public abuse created a stark contrast that made Derek's behavior appear even more petty and cruel by comparison. The glass doors of Elite Fitness swung open with perfect silence as James Peterson stepped into the marble lobby, his polished leather shoes clicking against the pristine floor. At 58, the gym owner possessed the confident bearing of someone who had built his business empire from nothing, transforming a single fitness studio into the most exclusive health club in the city. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt, his silver hair styled with the precision that matched every other detail of his appearance. James had arrived for his weekly inspection, a routine visit designed to ensure that Elite Fitness maintained the exacting standards that justified its premium pricing. He expected to find the usual morning scene, well-dressed professionals pursuing their fitness goals in an atmosphere of quiet sophistication. Instead, he discovered a crowd of members gathered around the reception area. Their attention focused on what appeared to be a heated confrontation. His experienced eyes immediately assessed the situation, taking in the elderly woman standing calmly at the center of attention. Derek's flushed face and defensive posture, and the uncomfortable expressions of the members who had abandoned their workouts to witness whatever drama was unfolding. James approached with measured steps, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone present. "Derek," James said in the tone he reserved for situations requiring immediate explanation. "What exactly is happening here?" Derek's face brightened with relief at his employer's arrival, convinced that James would support his efforts to maintain gym standards. He straightened his black polo shirt and stepped forward eagerly, grateful for the opportunity to explain his professional handling of a difficult situation. "Mr. Peterson, thank goodness you're here," Derek began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone reporting a job well done. "I've been dealing with this elderly woman who's insisting on using our facilities despite obvious safety concerns. She has membership paperwork, but clearly doesn't understand the level of fitness required for our equipment. I've offered alternatives and even suggested a full refund, but she's being completely unreasonable about accepting more appropriate options." Derek gestured toward Margaret with the exasperated air of someone who had exhausted all reasonable solutions. "I was just about to call security to escort her out. The situation is making our members uncomfortable, and frankly, the insurance liability alone makes it impossible to allow someone of her physical limitations access to our professional-grade equipment. She simply doesn't belong in an environment like Elite Fitness." James listened to Derek's explanation with growing concern, his experienced businessman's instincts detecting something fundamentally wrong with the situation. In his 15 years of building Elite Fitness into an exclusive brand, he had never witnessed such a public confrontation in his lobby. The uncomfortable expressions on his members' faces told him that whatever Derek thought he was accomplishing was damaging the sophisticated atmosphere that justified their premium pricing. "What did you say the member's name was?" James asked, though Derek had not actually mentioned it during his hurried explanation. "Thompson," Derek replied confidently. "Margaret Thompson. She showed up this morning with paperwork, but obviously there's been some kind of mistake or misunderstanding about our membership requirements." James felt his stomach tighten as recognition struck him immediately. Margaret Thompson was not just any member, she held one of only 12 lifetime memberships that Elite Fitness had ever issued, purchased 6 months earlier with a single payment that had made his accountant double-check the bank transfer. The premium membership included unlimited access to all facilities, personal training sessions, and priority booking for all programs. More puzzling still, the membership had been purchased through a high-end concierge service that typically handled arrangements for celebrities and wealthy clients who valued their privacy. "Mrs. Thompson," James said, stepping around Derek to address her directly. "I apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced this morning. I'm James Peterson, the owner of Elite Fitness." Margaret nodded politely, her composure unchanged despite the ongoing spectacle surrounding her. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson. I was hoping to begin using your facilities today, specifically the Olympic weightlifting platform, if that would be possible." The specific request hit James like a physical blow. The Olympic platform was the most specialized piece of equipment in the entire facility, installed at considerable expense for the handful of serious competitive athletes who used Elite Fitness for training. Most members never approached the platform, intimidated by its professional-grade barbells and bumper plates. Yet this elderly woman in her simple cardigan was asking for it by name with the casual familiarity of someone who understood exactly what it represented. Derek's confident expression began to waver as he sensed a shift in the dynamic. James's tone toward Mrs. Thompson carried none of the supportive authority Derek had expected. Instead, his employer seemed genuinely concerned about how she had been treated, and Derek felt the first stirrings of doubt about his handling of the situation. The crowd of members sensed the change as well. their attention sharpening as they realized they might be witnessing something far more significant than a simple membership dispute. Margaret's request for the Olympic platform hung in the air like a challenge, suggesting depths to this quiet woman that no one had suspected. James studied Margaret's calm expression, trying to reconcile the unassuming elderly woman before him with someone requesting access to Olympic-level equipment. Her simple appearance suggested afternoon tea and garden clubs, not competitive powerlifting, yet something in her steady gaze hinted at depths he was only beginning to suspect. "A master's competition?" James asked carefully, his tone shifting from polite curiosity to genuine interest. "Are you currently training for a specific event, Mrs. Thompson?" Margaret adjusted her canvas bag on her shoulder, the gesture revealing weathered hands that spoke of decades of serious physical work. "The National Masters Powerlifting Championships are in 3 months," she replied matter-of-factly. "I need to maintain my training schedule if I'm going to be competitive in my age division." The words hit the growing crowd like electricity. Members who had been content to observe from a distance found themselves stepping closer, their casual interest transforming into genuine curiosity. The mention of national championships suggested a level of athletic achievement that seemed impossible to reconcile with Derek's dismissive treatment of her as a confused elderly woman who had wandered into the wrong building. James felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. The lifetime membership purchased through an exclusive concierge service. The specific request for Olympic equipment. Now mention of national competition. His knowledge of powerlifting history was limited, but something about the name Margaret Thompson was triggering a memory he could not quite grasp. "Mrs. Thompson," James said slowly, "could you tell me a bit about your competitive background?" Margaret's response was characteristically modest. "I competed for a number of years when I was younger. I'm hoping to return to masters competition after taking some time away from the sport." Derek watched this exchange with growing confusion and mounting dread. The confidence he had felt moments earlier was evaporating as his employer's attitude toward the elderly woman became increasingly deferential. The crowd of members was no longer looking at Margaret with pity or amusement, but with genuine curiosity about what they might be about to witness. "Would it be possible to use the platform now?" Margaret asked politely. "I prefer to train early in the morning when it's less crowded." "But," James nodded immediately. "Of course. Please, allow me to escort you to the equipment area." As they walked toward the glass doors Derek had been blocking, the crowd of members followed at a respectful distance, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. The morning routine of elite fitness had been completely abandoned in favor of discovering who Margaret Thompson really was. Margaret approached the Olympic weightlifting platform with the reverence of someone returning to a sacred space. The specialized area occupied a corner of the gym, separated from the general equipment by rubberized flooring and surrounded by mirrors that reflected every angle of movement. The platform itself was constructed of solid hardwood, worn smooth by years of serious training, with embedded steel plates that could handle the impact of hundreds of pounds being dropped from overhead. She set her canvas bag on a nearby bench and removed a pair of worn leather lifting shoes, their soles flat and stable, designed specifically for powerlifting rather than general fitness. As she laced them with practiced efficiency, her movements began to change. The tentative shuffle that had characterized her walk through the lobby gave way to purposeful, economical motions that spoke of decades of muscle memory. Margaret began her warm-up with bodyweight squats, her form textbook perfect as she descended with controlled precision and rose with fluid power. Her breathing was rhythmic and deliberate, each movement flowing into the next with the unconscious grace of someone who had performed these exercises thousands of times. The members who had gathered to watch found themselves witnessing a transformation that defied everything they thought they understood about aging and physical capability. She moved to the empty barbell, 45 pounds of Olympic standard steel that rang with a distinctive sound as she lifted it from the rack. Her grip was sure and practiced, her hands finding their positions without conscious thought. Margaret performed a series of warm-up deadlifts with just the bar, her technique revealing years of elite-level training. Her back remained perfectly straight, her core engaged, and her movement pattern flawless. The crowd watched in growing amazement as Margaret began loading weight plates onto the barbell. She selected 45-pound plates with casual familiarity, sliding them onto the bar with the efficient movements of someone completely comfortable with heavy equipment. The distinctive clang of Olympic plates meeting steel echoed through the suddenly quiet gym as she added a second pair, then a third. By the time Margaret had loaded 225 pounds onto the barbell, the gathered members were no longer whispering among themselves. A hush had fallen over the group as they watched this elderly woman prepare to attempt a lift that many of them could not perform. Her pre-lift ritual was methodical and precise, checking her grip, adjusting her stance, and taking several deep breaths while visualizing the movement ahead. Derek stood frozen near the platform's edge, his face pale as he watched Margaret's professional preparation. Every movement she made demonstrated expertise that rendered his earlier lectures about gym safety absurd. The woman he had tried to redirect to chair exercises was preparing to lift more weight than he had ever attempted in his 6 years as a trainer. Margaret stepped to the loaded barbell with the measured confidence of a master craftsperson approaching their workbench. The weight that had shocked the onlookers represented merely the beginning of her warm-up routine, though none of them could possibly know that yet. She positioned her feet with mathematical precision, her worn lifting shoes finding their grip on the platform's textured surface. The gym fell completely silent as Margaret bent at the hips and knees, her weathered hands wrapping around the knurled steel with a grip that had once been among the strongest in the world. Her setup was flawless. Shoulders back, chest up, spine neutral, and core engaged with the automatic precision of someone who had performed this movement thousands of times under the scrutiny of international judges. She paused for a moment at the bottom of the lift, her entire body coiled like a spring. Then, with a controlled explosion of power that defied every assumption the watching crowd had made about her capabilities, Margaret drove through her heels and lifted the loaded barbell from the platform. The 225 pounds rose smoothly and steadily, her technique so perfect it appeared effortless despite the tremendous weight involved. The barbell traveled in a straight line from floor to lockout, Margaret's form never wavering as she completed the lift and stood tall with the weight. She held the position for a moment, demonstrating complete control before setting the barbell down with the same careful precision she had used to lift it. The distinctive sound of Olympic plates meeting the platform echoed through the stunned silence like applause. James Peterson felt the blood drain from his face as the impossible became undeniably real before his eyes. The name that had been nagging at his memory suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity, and he felt as though he had been struck by lightning. "Margaret Thompson," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the silent gym. "You're Margaret Thompson!" The crowd stirred as James stepped forward, his expression mixing awe with horror at what they had all witnessed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the hushed facility, "you are in the presence of a two-time Olympic powerlifting medalist. Margaret Thompson won gold at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal and silver 4 years later in Moscow. She held multiple world records in her weight class throughout the 1970s and 80s. Derek felt as though the floor had opened beneath his feet. The elderly woman he had patronized and publicly humiliated was not just any gym member, but one of the greatest powerlifters in Olympic history. The weight she had just lifted with casual ease was more than he had ever successfully deadlifted in his entire career. Derek's face transformed from confusion to absolute horror as James's words penetrated his consciousness. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale and trembling as the full weight of his catastrophic mistake crashed down upon him. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air, as he struggled to process the reality of what he had done. The elderly woman he had publicly ridiculed, patronized, and attempted to eject from the gym was not just a member, she was Olympic royalty. Every condescending word he had spoken echoed in his memory with devastating clarity. His lectures about gym safety to someone who had lifted on the world's biggest stages, his suggestions about chair exercises to a woman who had represented her country at the highest level of international competition, his pompous declarations about maintaining elite fitness standards while humiliating a legend whose achievements dwarfed anything he could ever hope to accomplish. Derek's legs felt weak as he watched Margaret calmly remove the weight plates from the barbell, her movements still displaying the technical precision that had made her a champion. She had lifted 225 pounds as easily as he might lift a bag of groceries, and he realized with sickening clarity that this had probably been a light warm-up for someone of her caliber. The crowd of members underwent their own transformation as James's revelation sank in. The curious whispers and uncomfortable glances gave way to stunned silence, then gradually shifted to expressions of genuine awe and profound embarrassment. Many of them had witnessed Derek's treatment of Margaret without intervening, complicit in their silence as an Olympic champion was subjected to public humiliation based solely on her age and appearance. Sarah Chen was the first to break the spell of shocked silence. She began clapping slowly, her applause echoing through the quiet gym as she looked directly at Margaret with undisguised admiration. The sound seemed to release the tension that had gripped everyone present, and gradually other members joined in, their applause building into genuine appreciation for what they had witnessed. Margaret turned from the platform with the same quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. She acknowledged the applause with a slight nod, but her expression remained humble and composed. There was no triumph in her bearing, no vindication or satisfaction at Derek's obvious distress. She had simply done what she came to do, just as she had done thousands of times before in gyms and competition venues around the world. The contrast between Derek's earlier arrogance and his current mortification was stark and complete, witnessed by everyone present. James Peterson stood frozen for several moments, his mind reeling as he processed the full magnitude of what had occurred under his watch. An Olympic champion had been publicly humiliated in his facility by his own head trainer, witnessed by dozens of members who would undoubtedly share this story throughout the city's fitness community. The reputation he had spent 15 years building could be irreparably damaged by this single morning's events. "Mrs. Thompson," James began, his voice heavy with genuine remorse, "I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for the treatment you received here today. What happened is completely unacceptable and goes against every value that elite fitness claims to represent." He approached her with the deference due to visiting royalty, his usual business confidence replaced by obvious distress. "Your membership will be upgraded to our lifetime platinum level at no additional cost, and I will personally ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." Derek finally found his voice, though it emerged as little more than a strangled whisper. "Mrs. Thompson, I had no idea. I never intended." His words tumbled over each other as he struggled to form a coherent apology. "I was completely wrong about everything. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say." Margaret finished toweling off her hands and turned to face both men with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Her expression held no anger or vindictiveness, only the patient understanding of someone who had witnessed far worse behavior during her decades in competitive athletics. "Mr. Peterson, Mr. Martinez," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the still silent gym, "I appreciate your apologies, but I hope this experience can serve a greater purpose than simply resolving one unfortunate incident." She looked around at the gathered members, many of whom were still staring at her with newfound respect and lingering embarrassment about their own initial judgments. "We all make assumptions based on appearances," Margaret continued, her tone gentle but firm. "The lesson here isn't that you should have recognized me specifically, but that every person deserves basic respect, regardless of age, appearance, or any other superficial characteristic. I've been dismissed and underestimated many times throughout my life, and I've learned that responding with dignity and grace accomplishes far more than anger ever could." Derek hung his head, the weight of her gracious response somehow more crushing than any harsh rebuke could have been. Her willingness to turn his shameful behavior into a teaching moment revealed depths of character that made his earlier arrogance seem even more petty and small. Margaret returned to the platform with the quiet focus of someone resuming an interrupted conversation with an old friend. The crowd of members maintained a respectful distance, but their fascination with witnessing Olympic-level technique up close kept them lingering in the area. She methodically added more weight to the barbell, her movements economical and precise as she prepared for her working sets. Over the next 40 minutes, Margaret demonstrated the technical mastery that had made her a champion. Her squats descended with controlled precision, her back remaining perfectly straight as she moved weights that left the watching members speechless. Her bench press technique was flawless, the barbell following an exact path that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. Each repetition looked identical to the last, her form never compromising despite the increasing loads. Between sets, Margaret noticed a young man struggling with his deadlift technique at a nearby station. She approached him with the same gentle demeanor she had maintained throughout the morning's ordeal. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Would you mind if I offered a suggestion about your form?" The young man, still starstruck from witnessing her earlier performance, nodded eagerly. Margaret guided him through proper hip hinge mechanics, emphasizing the importance of keeping his chest up and engaging his core. "Strength comes from technique, not from loading more weight," she explained patiently. "Perfect your movement pattern first, and the heavy weights will follow naturally." Word of her willingness to share knowledge spread quickly through the gym. Soon, Margaret found herself surrounded by members seeking advice on everything from grip positioning to breathing techniques. She answered each question with the patient thoroughness of someone who genuinely cared about helping others improve safely. "I see too many people here lifting with their egos instead of their brains," Margaret observed to a group that had gathered around her. "In competition, I learned that the heaviest weight means nothing if you cannot control it perfectly. Focus on feeling each muscle working, understanding each movement, and respecting the weight you are handling." Sarah Chen watched from nearby, amazed at how Margaret's presence had transformed the atmosphere of the gym. The usual competitive tension had given way to genuine learning and mutual respect. Members who normally ignored each other were discussing technique and offering encouragement. Margaret had not just demonstrated physical strength. She had shown them what true leadership looked like. 6 months had transformed elite fitness into something James Peterson had never imagined when he first conceived his exclusive club. The marble lobby still gleamed with the same polished elegance. But the atmosphere had evolved from intimidating exclusivity to welcoming excellence. New programs filled the schedule, and the sound of diverse voices discussing technique and encouragement had replaced the previous culture of silent competition and judgment. The most visible change was the Tuesday and Thursday morning senior strength program, which had become one of the gym's most popular offerings. Margaret arrived at 7:30 each morning for her personal training sessions, but she invariably stayed afterward to work with the growing group of older adults who had discovered the joy of serious strength training under her gentle guidance. The Olympic platform that had once intimidated most members now hosted regular classes, where 70-year-olds learned proper deadlift technique alongside 30-year-old executives. Derek Martinez bore little resemblance to the arrogant gatekeeper who had once blocked Margaret's path. The humiliation of that morning had shattered his superficial confidence, but Margaret's gracious response had given him something far more valuable: genuine purpose. He had thrown himself into learning about senior fitness, studying adaptive training techniques and age-specific programming with the same dedication he had once reserved for his own physique. "Mrs. Thompson taught me that strength has nothing to do with age and everything to do with respect," Derek often told new members during orientations. His voice carried a humility that had been completely absent 6 months earlier. "She showed me that my job isn't to judge who belongs here, but to help everyone reach their potential safely." The transformation in Derek's approach had rippled throughout the entire staff. Kevin Rodriguez now led specialized workshops on inclusive fitness practices. The front desk team had received extensive training on respectful communication with members of all ages and backgrounds. Even the gym's marketing materials had evolved to showcase the diversity of their membership rather than focusing solely on young, conventionally attractive athletes. Margaret had become an unofficial ambassador for the facility, her presence lending credibility to elite fitness's commitment to inclusive excellence. Young powerlifters sought her mentorship, business executives asked for her insights on mental toughness, and older adults found inspiration in her proof that age was merely a number. She had established a scholarship program that provided memberships to seniors who couldn't afford the premium fees, funded by donations from members who had witnessed her remarkable display of grace under pressure. The waiting list for elite fitness had actually grown longer since implementing the senior programs, as word spread throughout the city about a gym where Olympic champions trained alongside grandparents, where technique mattered more than ego. and where respect was the most important weight anyone could carry. Margaret Thompson's quiet revolution had spread far beyond the polished walls of elite fitness. Her story became legend in gyms throughout the city, shared in whispered conversations between sets and retold during post-workout conversations. But the real transformation was not in the telling of her tale, but in the fundamental shift she had inspired in how people viewed strength, age, and human worth. The woman who had shuffled into elite fitness in her faded cardigan had accomplished something no marketing campaign or corporate initiative could achieve. She had proven that true power lies not in appearance, but in character. Her response to Derek's humiliation had demonstrated a strength that no barbell could measure, showing everyone present that dignity and grace under pressure were the heaviest weights any person could lift. Elite fitness had become a model for inclusive excellence, attracting delegations from fitness facilities across the country who wanted to understand how an exclusive gym had transformed into a welcoming community without sacrificing its standards. Margaret's influence extended beyond the physical changes to the programs and policies. She had fundamentally altered how members treated one another. The culture of silent judgment had given way to active encouragement, where experienced lifters sought opportunities to mentor newcomers regardless of age or ability level. Derek Martinez often reflected on how close he had come to destroying his career through ignorance and prejudice. Margaret's gracious response had saved not only his job but his character, teaching him that true leadership meant lifting others up rather than keeping them out. He had learned that the most important qualification for any gym was not physical prowess, but the willingness to treat every person with basic human respect. The lesson Margaret taught, that morning, continues to resonate because it speaks to a universal truth we all need reminding of. Every person you encounter carries invisible strength, wisdom, and experience that cannot be judged by outward appearance. The elderly woman in simple clothes might be an Olympic champion. The quiet teenager might be a mathematical genius. The person who looks different from you might have overcome challenges that would break your spirit. How many Margaret Thompsons do you encounter in your daily life? How often do you make assumptions about people's capabilities based on their age, appearance, or circumstances? The next time you meet someone who doesn't fit your expectations, remember this story. Choose curiosity over judgment. Choose respect over dismissal. Choose to see the strength that lies beneath the surface, waiting to inspire and teach you something extraordinary about the limitless potential of the human spirit. As Jake prepared for his demonstration backflip, he paused at the edge of the halfpipe where it all began 6 months ago. The same concrete stretched before him, but everything else had transformed beyond recognition. Where once there had been exclusion, now there was celebration. Where once there had been mockery, now there was mentorship. Where once there had been barriers, now there were bridges. "You know what I learned that day?" Jake said to the gathered crowd of workshop participants, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and determination he'd felt during his first visit. "It wasn't just about proving I could do a backflip. It was about proving that our biggest limitations usually exist in other people's minds, not in our own bodies or circumstances." He gestured toward Chad, who was helping Maria Santos adjust her wheelchair's positioning for her next attempt. "The person who tried hardest to convince me I didn't belong became one of my closest allies when he realized that strength comes in many forms. That day changed him just as much as it changed me." The documentary cameras captured Jake's words, but more importantly, they captured the faces of young, adaptive athletes who saw their own possibilities reflected in his story. Children who'd been told their dreams were unrealistic now had living proof that the word impossible was often just opinion masquerading as fact. Every person here today represents someone who refused to accept limitations. Jake continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd walked the walk. "But remember, this isn't just about adaptive sports. This is about every time someone tells you that you can't, that you're different, that you don't belong. Those moments are opportunities to show the world what you're really made of." Jake positioned his wheelchair and took the familiar grip that had launched him into viral fame and professional success. But as he prepared to drop into the pipe, he wasn't thinking about sponsors or social media followers. He was thinking about every person who'd ever felt judged, dismissed, or underestimated, The greatest victories aren't just personal, he called out as he began his approach. They're the ones that open doors for everyone who comes after us. As Jake launched into his signature backflip, spinning through the air with a grace that had captivated millions, the crowd erupted not just in celebration of his skill, but in recognition of a truth that transcended sports. That human potential, like human spirit, knows no boundaries except those we choose to accept. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to prove that impossible is just another word for untested.